recommender is saying or whatever you're saying in your statement of purpose. Because when the reviewers, they actually see your application, it's a whole packet. You see it as like separate elements, like you never see the letter, you never see other parts, but they see it all together. So if they say one holistic story, that would be really good.
Yeah. Does anyone want to add more to it? Maybe Dhruti, you can add something to it, or Priyam.
Thank you. I can step in, Teja. Thank you so much. So I think what I would love to just add to whatever Sathvik said, I really echo with all of that. And I think the personal statement is all entitled to the entirety about what you are as a person, a reflection of what brings you to your research interest. Again, like what Sathvik said, something very briefly, but also in terms of maybe an illustration of what your recommenders are speaking for you and what your researchers' interests are in terms of, for instance, narrating real life scenarios, how you have navigated through critical situations, at the same time trying to demonstrate passion for STEM, a little bit of academic excellence, but how you've interacted and ensured there's convergence between people across various disciplines. And it's more you as a person, your qualities and your personality that needs to come out through your essays. And perhaps they need to speak to the letters that are being just given. So I think it's a holistic thing, a 360-degree lens that you put towards your academic transcripts, your personal essay, and the letters of recommendation. And most importantly, what I think is most important is what you would like to do if you get the Quad Fellowship. Why is it that you who needs to get the Quad Fellowship and not someone else? I think, and how is that impacting society, STEM? And I think the impact that you're trying to generate is the most crucial thing. So it'll be nice if all of this could be laid out well and everything speaks well to each other. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dhruti and Sathvik. I think I'm going to move to the next question. So essentially, there's two questions that are being asked, and I'm going to combine them. So the first question is, how did you talk about your social impact that your research is going to have? And someone asked, what is the exact social impact that your research had? So I think we can talk about it combined together. And the second question that I also wanted to touch up was the two prompts that are given to sort of talk about your abilities or leadership. Those are 250 words prompt, and I'm going to read them out again. So the first one is labeled curiosity, compassion, and integrity. So essentially it's like, describe the world you come from. How did the world around you shape you, to keep it brief? And the second one is initiative, innovation, and creativity. So it's essentially like describe a moment when you created positive impact. So I think we can combine these two and talk about it. So the first one is, how does your research have social impact? And the second one is sort of like, what did you write for the prompts from last year? So that's the question. I think I'm going to pitch in first, and I'm going to briefly explain what I did. So essentially, last year, the prompts were a little bit different. The last year prompts were more explicit about saying, talk about a time where you were a bridge between STEM and policy. And another prompt, as far as I remember, was like, talk about some time when you showed leadership qualities. So the prompts this year are a little bit different, so keep that in mind. And with that being said, so I work in energy and sustainability, that's like zoomed out. But my actual research in lab is like catalysis that is related to energy. So it's all about like renewable energy, clean energy, sustainability, converting carbon dioxide into something useful. So those things. So I definitely talked about that and talked about how that has larger implications, or it's connected to the larger themes, whether it's like United Nations goals, sustainability themes, clean and affordable energy for everyone. So I sort of linked everything together. And I would say that even if you're doing something that's like super fundamental, maybe step back and try to talk about your research from like 10,000 feet above or 30,000 feet above. So even if you're doing something that's like super fundamental, you can still sort of relate it to some broader themes. So that's my answer for the first one. And for the second one, yeah, like I said, the themes were a little bit different, but I essentially talked about like situations where I was in a society or like a club where I was actively interacting with people from industry, academia, and the government. So sort of acting as this shuttle that was carrying information from one person to another. So I talked about how that may be a better person in terms of communicating science and also understanding how things work in different pillars. Like if in industry, the way they make decisions is very different from how they make decisions in government, and also it's very different from how they make decisions in academia. So I sort of talked about these. And one thing I would say is that I kept everything very personal. I didn't say anecdotal. I didn't say anything that was like general statements. I didn't say, oh, a bridge between STEM and policy is essential, because we know that. But instead, I showed how I realized that or learned that, right? If that makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna pass it on to Junryu. You can go first, and then after that, I think Priyam can explain what she did for her application. Yeah.
Could you repeat the first and second question? Like the
Okay, again, first question is how does your research have social impact? Or what did you talk about that? And the second question is essentially what did you talk about for your prompts? So this year the prompts are about like curiosity or how did the world shape you? And the second prompt is some time where you showed innovation or innovative skills.
Yeah, I think for research and how mentioning that is sometimes I think depending on what your research is, obviously it's very hard to relate to social good or public good. Maybe it's not as obvious. You know, what Teja does, you know, with sustainability, there might be a more clear outlook on, okay, this is the impact I could have. But for certain other people, that might not be the case. But I think that's still okay. And the way that I would approach that is maybe focus on one very specific real life example or real life problem that's out there. It could be something very local. I think oftentimes when you approach it, you almost feel like you almost feel obligated to sort of make it into a very grand scale or global scale. I think that's not necessary all the time, although obviously if your research is very much a global scale, that's definitely good. But it can be very local. It can be constrained to one specific region. I think the biggest thing is to have clarity in why you think what you do is important, and don't try to overinflate it just for the sake of it. So that's the general approach I would take regarding first question. Second one, I think the prompt, as Tia said, last year was a bit different compared to this year. When it comes to so we had we had a question called intersection of STEM and social good, and the other one was what unique perspectives do you bring to the Quad Fellowship? And for both of them, I focus on like very like one moment of my life where I gained a new insight into things and how that impacted me as in my case, like I'm a civil engineer, so how that moment impacted me as a civil engineer, what I wanted to do in this discipline. So I guess that's one way to approach your writing is to maybe look back because I do think that there's always like a moment in your you know past 3 or 4 years where you felt like oh like I really like or love what I'm doing because of this very like specific moment. And that moment is only something that you know. And uh, for those prompts when you answer it, I think that's what you should focus on. And as Sathvik said before, um, don't try to write things that are on your CV into the essay because the CV is there to, you know, objectively show what you've done. But like in these prompts, really show like those very moments that you had in your mind, um, your struggle internally and like what you thought about those are the valuable insights that you could really pull out from yourself and write that into answering those prompts. Sorry if it was a bit very general, but yeah.
Priyam, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I would agree to Junryu what he was saying. And to this, I would like to add that you just have to be true to yourself. And what I was doing that time was like I was working on medical imaging using artificial intelligence applications. So in my PhD also, I have the same topic, but in my master's, I picked up a very small part of it. And I was not saying, like, I will say that the examiners don't want you to just break the rock or do something very big. Whatever you are doing, be it very small, but you have to be true to yourself. And the vision should be very clear that whatever you are doing, that is applicable to the real world. And you can actually use it somewhere for something good, for fixing something that is still not available. And also I would like to say that you don't have to make this like quad fellowship is the only thing you have in your life now. No, you will go on with your research, be it anything, and quad fellowship will be a stepping stone for your career. So for your research, I'll just say, just set up a vision that what actually you want to do, what direction you will make a social impact, and then you can address it. That's it.
Yeah. So I want to pose the next question to Awani. So essentially, there are two people who are asking about, did you have publications before when you were applying? Is it necessary to have publications? So I don't, maybe
I
you
just
can touch
answered
on
that.
Yeah,
just
you don't have to have,
answered
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go into the next question too. Essentially, it's about like, did you redo your CVs? So this is like, all of you can answer this in one line, and then I'm going to combine that with the next question, which I think takes more lines. Essentially, what is your experience as a quad fellow? So someone asked during the, like on the website, it says a lot about policy and impact, but what does it mean? What have you been able to experience? And what experience comes with quad fellowship? So it's two questions. First one, what did you do with your CV? And second one is your experience. So Awani, I think you can start off, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Teja. So I did not really change my CV because I think CV is just a list of your professional accomplishments so far. So I did not really change it. And the second question, what was the second question?
So how was your experience as a quad fellow been? Like, what have you experienced?
Yeah, I think being a quad fellow, first of all, I got a really nice community of like-minded people where I can like brainstorm with them and look at the research as more interdisciplinarily, because my future goal is to commercialize my research and build a startup. I realized that I do need people outside electrical engineering when I'm actually making the product out of my research. So it helps to have a community of people who are who have similar purpose as you and bring a lot of abilities to the table. Another thing regarding the policy, this I also mentioned when I was writing my personal statement, that for Quad countries, it was important to have 5G infrastructure in all the countries, and different Quad countries had different strengths. And I had mentioned regarding the social impact, how each Quad country could utilize their strength to have 5G infrastructure implementation. So that actually gave me opportunity. US started Center of Semiconductor Excellence, and they invited me to provide inputs for the White House correspondence. So I actually get to contribute and have real impact through policy making, which was not possible if I wasn't a Quad fellow.
Yeah, I think that's a good start to this question. So I think I saw a lot of questions. So a lot of people have put their questions in the chat instead of the Q&A. Okay, so we do have a lot of questions to get through in the chat. I think we will just finish this round with one more person pitching in. So I don't know who wants to pitch in. Maybe Dhruti, you can pitch in, or Priyanka. I think Priyanka can pitch in. And then after that, I'm going to pass it over to Awani to go through the questions in the chat, because a lot of people have put a lot of questions in the chat. So yeah, Priyanka.
Yeah, thank you, Teja, and thank you guys for your questions. I think for the first part of it about the CV, so like I told you, I'm a master's student, and for me, I really did not have any publication, so I don't think you need to put in that much focus into your publications. It's good to have, it's nice to have, but not a need to have, you know. So just be confident in the work that you've done so far, and you can go from there. Coming to the second part about the community and how my experience has been being a quad fellow so far, as you could have sensed from like Avni and everybody else on the panel today, we just have a beautiful community of people around us. Even when we were organized, even when Teja like stepped up to organize this meeting, I think she just put in a chat in the group, and then all of us just showed up. So it's like, yeah, it's a very like-minded community. To go off of a little bit of like apart from academic and stuff like that, so we do have conversations like that. But then also, a friend of mine or of another fellow lives in Boston and I am in New York. Recently I just visited her and she kind of showed me around. I had a place to stay, you know. So it goes across just academic things and everything. You really meet friends and have a community. So I think in that sense this has been one of the best things of my life. And I just want to add one more small thing about somebody, like it was a previous question as to somebody said that you need to be absolutely honest. I think it was Priyam. And also, fun fact, Priyam was my buddy, is my buddy, but we had a buddy system and Priyam was my buddy. So it's good that we're both here. Anyways, I was going to say that please be like absolutely honest. You guys have done amazing things in your life. For even like, it's just 70 people on the call right now, right? Like so many people must have seen it, but only you are here. So it means that you have like a lot of determination, and of course you have a lot of content as well. So I just want to say, just be honest in your applications and it's going to work out.
So Vani, I think you can take over, and I think we can start with the question that talked about the interview process, because I think that's very important and we didn't touch on it. So I don't know, maybe Avani, do you want to start with it, and then we can just have someone else also pitch in for that?
Yeah, sounds good. So regarding the process of interview, for us, it looked like there was one technical interview and the second one was more HR type of interview. So the technical interview didn't actually go to the details of my research or the fundamentals of how I design something, but more like a general big picture of my research and how it's going to have a good social impact. One thing over there I would like to mention is that you should be able to explain your research to somebody who is not deep into your field. So using layman's terms language helped me while communicating my research and still preserving the complexity of the research. So that was the takeaway for the first interview. For the second one, HR interview, the questions were not really the common HR questions that we find on the internet. So thinking on your feet is important for that part. And they ask really good questions. I think you, again, for that, I would echo what Priyam and Priyanka said, that you have to be honest with your values. So having a self-reflection of what your values are and how they align with Quad Fellowship's values would be really good exercise if you want to prepare for the second part of the interview. So Priyam, do you want to talk about your experience?
Yeah, I would love to. So, for me, the first round, which was the technical round, by chance, the interviewer was from the same field as I was in. So he was quite interested into my topic, and he wanted to know that what I have thought of. I did not implemented that anything by that time. I just had an idea in my mind that what I have to implement and how will I implement that. So I explained him everything, the whole pipeline that I will be using it, and he actually went into the depth to ask that how I am thinking like that. Of course, they will not ask you formulas or anything like that, but yeah, they want to know that if you have a proper pipeline in your mind or not. This was the first interview, and the second round was, I think, one of the most different interviews I have ever appeared in my life. That was not a kind of to which I can say that it was good or it was bad. No, it was just a discussion that I had with the panelist which was there. And for that, I would like to say that don't ever be negative into that interview, because they will ask you regarding some of the problems of your society, maybe about your weaknesses, or maybe about anything, maybe about the weather also. You don't have to be negative in that, that everything is going bad, everything is falling apart. No, just say, just be like that, yes, I know there are problems like this, or there have been things going on like this, but of course we are there, and these can be the solutions, or anything like this we can do for it. So that's what I would say. Thank you. And next I will maybe like ask Priyanka to pitch in.
Yeah, thank you, Priyam. I think not only in the second interview, but in life also, let's not be so pessimistic. So if you see problems around you, maybe us thinking on how we can solve it is better than, like, focusing on the negativity. But yeah, like Avani and Priyam said, the first one was a technical one. So even for me, I got a professor who was in the same field as me. So we were discussing about the biases which come with artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how I plan to work on that, and why I even chose that topic. So that was like a good discussion. Also, whatever time is set, I think my call was for like 30-minute chat, the tech interview. It really stays till that much. So it doesn't go even 1 minute above it. So make sure that you, like, whatever you want to say, pace yourself and then you do it. As in, like, I don't know if everyone did it, but I did do like practice interviews, as cliche as it sounds, like looking in the mirror and talking about my research. So I did that. So if it helps you, please do it. The second one, the panel interview, absolutely, like both of them said, I got questions that I had never imagined. So there is no scope of being fake in that interview. So you just be your absolute vulnerable, honest self. Make sure you be like true to yourself and answer the questions as they're asked. And there's absolutely no need to make up any stuff as you go. So yeah, Junryu, maybe you want to go next?
Yeah, I think a lot of people already said what I wanted to say, but yeah, I think for the technical interview, in my case, it was a different professor in like a different field. So just had a really lighthearted, it wasn't, I never felt like it was an interview. It was more like a discussion, and really, I think they just want to understand how you perceive problems, or how you perceive challenges, or how you perceive um what's happening in your domain or your field. Um, so in that sense, for me, the technical interview was really a discussion about that, explaining what are some common problems in the industry, or in the domain. The second one, as a lot of the other fellows said, yeah, it's kind of unconventional. Um, but for me, I think it helped because I we got into a lot of discussions about what were some of the social, um, geopolitical issues relating specifically to my domain. So those are some of the discussions that I had specifically. Um, I guess it's not really like a way to prepare for it, but maybe having some materials about, here are some issues that are common specifically relating to the industry. Relating to your domain of study would be very valuable. And most importantly, having your own ideas or having your own opinions about it would be good. And sharing that and why you think that as well through the second interview, I think it would be helpful, because then they can sort of see how you would perceive a problem, where you would perceive the problem, and how you look at that and how you evaluate that. So that's how I would go about it. And Sathvik, you can go next.
Yeah, I think what everyone said gives like what I'm also realizing as everyone takes turns and describes their experience, there is a lot of variation also in experiences, which I want to point out. Like you probably might not have an identical experience to what we went through, especially given that you're in a completely different year and they might have tweaked the process a little bit. My technical interview was a little bit more technical than what everyone else said. It was a general big picture thing, but it was more like because they first asked if I was already in a PhD program, and then I said yes. And since I was already 3 years in, I think they tested more like how good I've done. At least have a solid understanding of my domain, because the person who was interviewing me was also in the material science domain, and they were kind of familiar with the research that I do. So they asked some research specific. They didn't get, obviously, they don't get into like really small details, formulas, equations. Nobody asks you that. But it's more like, do you know your field to some extent? And how are you designing experiments? So there was a question about designing a particular experiment. And it was a really fun question. Honestly, you will enjoy these interviews more than being scared. You might be nervous leading up until them, but when the interview is going on, my gosh, the second interview, it was a heart-to-heart conversation, as Priyanka mentioned. You are in your most vulnerable state, and it felt scary in the beginning, but then it also felt very releasing, because I've never been through a process. Forget interview. You very rarely speak to normal people that way, and it was scary in the beginning because they just take a minute or two to introduce who are the interviewers. And I was scared because one of them works at the Pentagon, and I was like really scared. And but they happen to be the most down to earth, the most truest people. So here's just a general rule of thumb, is that the more higher up these people are, the more genuine, sincere, and down to earth they are. They're not going to be very critical of you. And one question, as many people pointed out, like, they were all curveball questions. One question I got was, recollect a time when someone showed you compassion, and how did that make you, do something you did not expect yourself to do? And that's a very weird question, and also very interesting. And they give you time. So they said, you can take around 2 to 3 minutes to think of your response and answer. We're not expecting you to like immediately jump in. You can take some time, but as Awani mentioned, 2 to 3 minutes is still not very long, so you should be able to think on your feet. So like just explore some hypothetical questions that you might come across. And the second interview, they did not like me talking about my research. I could tell, because the moment I brought up a little bit about my research, they kept diverting the conversation and they took it more to something else. I work on nanomaterials and semiconductors, and they were asking me questions about what I think about COVID-19 policies. So you maybe brush up a little bit about policy GQ. It might help, but I didn't really need that. And I think the last thing is, wait, I forgot the last one. But generally, yeah, this is the general spiel. But yeah, I mean, the second one's unpredictable, but the first one is just within your domain. You should also try to maybe do demo interviews with a friend or a colleague or a family member, so that they can just ask you some random questions about your research, and you should try practicing to explain it to someone who's not in your discipline. That would be really effective. That's what I did with a close friend of mine. She doesn't work in my domain, but she's a PhD student. And explaining my research and what I do to her was really helpful, because I use some of those, you de-jargonize all of your stuff and try to explain the same thing to your interviewer.
Yeah. So I'm just going to pitch in and say two things, sort of like two housekeeping things that I was planning to mention in the beginning. So first and foremost, a lot of things have changed for this cycle's application. So take everything we say with a grain of salt. So everything is from a personal capacity. So this is just about our experience. So some things have changed this year. Maybe the format for the interviews will change. But everything we said now is super helpful. A second thing that I also want to mention is that there are certain questions that people asked in the chat, which were essentially like logistical questions. And I think IIE is the best person to answer that. So I've redirected you to that. So just keep that in mind. And third one is that it's 2020 or like 8:20 PST time now. I just want to say that we are going to continue to stick around, or at least I'll be sticking around, and the other quad fellows, depending upon the time, will be sticking around. So if you still have questions, if you want to be on the call, you can continue to be on the call after 8:30 as well. But yeah, I just wanted to pitch in. But you don't have to feel pressured. And the quad fellows also, they may stick around, they may leave depending upon their availability. But yeah, Awani, please shoot the next question.
Yeah, so another common theme I saw in a couple of questions was the non-tech aspect of the application. So something similar to the diversity statement that we see in grad school applications. How did you show your, for example, helping disadvantaged groups, or like the compassion part and integrity part and sense of initiative regarding non-tech in your application?
Maybe I can start off this and be brief. Like I said, we didn't have this question last year, or it wasn't exactly phrased the same way, but I think this ties into your bigger impact through your research. But also at the same time, it doesn't just have to be about the impact that you have through your research or the research that you do in the lab. You can also intertwine and weave into the stuff, weave in the stuff that you do outside the lab. Maybe you also have run a society, run a club on campus that is helping students. Maybe you run a student chapter of something. Maybe you run some sustainability initiatives on campus. So those are things that I talked about. So you can definitely weave in many aspects of impact. Yeah.
I would also like to mention that I wrote some really non-technical things in that kind of question. Like, for example, they're looking for how well you get along with different cultures, for example. So I wrote that I had friends from different cultures. I learned different languages, and I showed my personal aspect into it. I also wrote about my hobbies, like solo traveling, and how it has given me different personality aspects which can help to the quad countries if I become a quad fellow. So you can also go completely non-technical if it is still relevant to helping quad countries and having a social impact. If yeah, and feel free to show your personality even if it's not just your research. Priyanka, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think so for me as well. So there was this question, similar kind of question as to how do you think you could because one of the main things of Quad Fellowship is also that you want to collaborate across borders, right? So cross-cultural collaboration is what's required. So when I was working at my last company, it was an MNC. So half of my team was in the US while I was in India. So I was talking about that stuff as well, as in across geolocations, I was working with different people and, bring in the challenges like of time zones, because some of you are tuning in from India. For you guys, it's morning. For us, it's the evening, right? So like, how do we navigate that? That shouldn't be a problem. So my basic understanding in life is by now is that conflict is not an hindrance to understanding. It's when you stop to kind of understand each other is when you face problems, right? So I kind of put that into this. And then also I brought in my personal experiences like Avani. So even though I'm from this one part, the eastern part of India, being an army kid personally, I've been to a lot of different states in the country and I picked up languages from across all of these places. So I also brought that in. And then One other thing I want to add is somebody asked in the question about the second interview is if there's any interesting questions that we remember. So one of my first questions was, when you stepped in the US, so what was your first interesting experience at the US airport? Um, which was uh, kind of funny, but also it was interesting because I did have an interesting experience. So when I came to the US, when I was leaving JFK, my Uber person was unable to kind of understand my English, I guess, or maybe because I do speak with a different accent. So you do feel like it is kind of frustrating sometimes. But I explained to them on how I work towards it, and how it could how having different accents does not mean that people cannot understand what you're saying. And the funny part was, one of them actually works for the Indian government in the foreign ministry, and then he was very interested in what I was saying. So yeah, so I'm just saying, like I said before as well, just be honest, give your honest answers, and specifically for your research, when you're trying to discuss it with people who might not be from your own backgrounds, they don't really have to understand the complexities of what you're doing, but how it is going to bring an impact. For the whole of your process, always remember STEM for society, and I think focus on that aspect, on how your research can bring a social impact. Junryu, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I had a similar experience, I guess. I worked for this company, or intern sort of, and I had the privilege of working in the US with Japanese companies. And so there were a lot of, so I was basically translator at the very beginning. So there were a lot of gaps that I had to fill, not just translating, but like industry standards as well. And you can imagine, like, when I was a sophomore, I'm still new to the industry, or still new to the discipline, and I had to kind of figure that one like on the go. But because of that, I also got to see like the huge difference as well, and how um certain standards that are more perceived as like prerequisite in Japan might not be the case in the US. And also the company that I happened to work for was a startup. So a startup culture was also very different from what I perceived as corporate culture. Because growing up in Japan, like corporate culture is like something you do hear a lot about when you live in Japan. So for me, that was a completely new perspective, being in a startup and like working towards growing the company. Um, so I just mentioned those points for that prompt. Again, like, you can mention other things such as more of a social, um, how do you bridge social gaps and whatever, but it can be something that you came across that you felt like, oh, like this is a difference in a culture or in the structure of society or whatever. And just mentioning again, like, I'm gonna repeat myself, but mentioning those moments where you genuinely felt like, oh, like this is different from what I've seen or what I've known so far, um, would be very valuable to write in your statements. I don't know if anyone else went. Do I give it back to Awani or Teja?
Yeah, Vani, shoot us with our next question.
I do want to be mindful of everybody's time. It's 8:30 p.m. So thank you everybody for joining and for your attention, and for all the Quad Fellows for being generous about your time and advice. I do need to leave now, so I would leave the forum open for everyone to answer the questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Awani. Okay, so now that Awani is leaving, I don't know, I can stay around for another 15 minutes. If you guys want to talk, what do you guys think? But also the attendees, our participants, feel free to leave if you have to leave. But if you have any pressing questions, you can use the next 50 minutes to ask.
50 or 15?
1-5. But you don't have to
1-5.
stay. You can leave if you want to. I just felt like there were many questions still coming in. And I just don't have anything to do now, but that's okay.
I think I'm gonna stay for 15 more minutes as well, but then I'm gonna go sleep.
Yeah.
One of the questions I see is somebody said they joined late. What qualities do they expect in the letter of recommendation? So just reiterating to what we've been discussing so far, the main theme of the fellowship is STEM for society. So they want to see how your research is can be impactful in the society, how you can bring collaboration across different cultures. And then in your letter of recommendations, I think what worked for speaking about myself, my personal experience is the fact that I went above and beyond my regular responsibilities, both in my industrial experience as well as my academic experience. So we are supposed to give out 3 LORs. For me, 2 of them were my professors, and one of them was a senior director at a firm where I was working at. And then I did mention this previously. I don't know how useful it is, but for my LORs, the people I put in were kind of Googleable, as in like they had research or they were familiar people. So if somebody looks them up, it kind of, shows that they've been doing some important work. So those were my people who were recommending me. So yeah, the qualities I would say is something that, any person who can work in teams, anybody who really has a drive for social impact, social change. So yeah, anything like that.
Yeah, I think we have covered a broad range of questions. Is there some question that is like super pressing? I think if just someone unmute you or raise your hand, and then I will address. We will give you an opportunity to unmute yourself and then say something, because I think we've covered almost all topics. Okay, someone raised their hand. Sarah, unmute yourself and tell us what is your pressing question briefly, as briefly as possible.
Yeah. Not so pressing. Just wanted to clarify one thing from what you were sharing before. So which prompt did you bring that diversity aspect into, talking about solo trips like Awani had mentioned?
Yeah. Wait, I think I don't think that's a prompt for you this year, right? You don't have a prompt that specifically says diversity. I think she just wanted to mention the different aspects of impact that you can talk about.
Okay, got it. Yeah, thank you.
So next I see Yashwant. Do you have any pressing questions? Tell us your pressing question, Yashwant.
Hey, hi, Teja. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful session. Is my voice audible?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful question. A wonderful session. My question is like, I'm a first year PhD student. I am currently rotating. I don't have my guide yet and my research topic confirmed yet. So is it preferable to take the LOR from my previous undergrad advisors or from the current rotation PIs? What do you prefer?
I think
yeah. Go ahead, Priyanka.
No, sorry. I was just saying that Sathvik, I think, answered this in chat before. So, because he was saying that if it's from a rotation PI, they might not have had too much exposure to the work you're doing. So, yeah. So you wanna take the LOR from somebody who knows you, like the authentic you, so they know your work style or how your problem solving skills. So I would say that going with the undergrad professor in that case would make more sense. Teja, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think Priyanka just explained it very well, so I'm gonna leave it at that. Before we move on to the next person who
that
can
one
ask
add-on question for this. Sorry for this one add-on question.
Okay, keep it brief. Keep it brief.
Yes, I'll keep it brief. So, is it the research recommendation letter or like the prof who I worked with the project? So that is better, or like academic, like subjects which I have taken? It's like the prof, the subjects. So what is better? Like,
I mean, I'm just going to keep it brief because I think we have another question that would like more input. So essentially, it's like you have to make sure that someone is able to explain your academic research and also your out of lab abilities. So all your 3 letter writers don't have to explain about all three, but sort of like put together, it should build a complete story. So that's what is important. And it's up to you to decide who'll be able to do it better and stuff like that. Okay, so
Thank
the
you.
pressing question that someone asked, and I want to make sure we cover it, is that the website does not say what are the qualities that a quad fellow has to embody. So according to you guys, all the quad fellows on this call, what do you think are the qualities that a quad fellow has to embody? Up to you. So Junryu, start us off. Like, what do you think are the quad fellow qualities?
It's like tougher than an interview question. I think for me, at least based on the people that I've met across the 4 countries, I think open to like dialogue, really, really opening up to things that you don't know about or things that you're not, it's not in your domain or field, and actively trying to understand what other people are doing is one of the, I guess, curiosity. I guess that's the one way to sum it up. I thought that was all the qualities that shared across all 100 of us.
Yeah. I think,
Yeah.
Priyanka, tell us.
I think along with that, the ability to say that you don't know something, but the curiosity to learn it. Just adding on to what Junryu said. I think when we talk to each other, the research areas were so varied that it's impossible for like us to know what everyone else is doing. So just saying that you don't know, but having the curiosity to talk to them. Like one of the fellows from Australia is working on environmental sciences and endangered species. So when I talked to her for the first time, I was blown because everyone knows today that climate change is such a big deal, but the way that it impacts small species, big species is insane. So the fact that I could learn from her, taking that was super important. And then also, I think just being nice in general, because I remember one of the people from the last organization who had worked on like the fellowship, they said that when they were reading applications, they were also trying to see if this person had the capacity to be nice. When we say nice, we mean because tomorrow we are going to be collaborating with one another. So if you have the ability to be nice to one another, basically.
Yeah. I think I just have one thing to add, which kind of like is similar to what everyone said. I think at least the way the application was framed last year and kind of the programming and opportunities that we had, it really seemed like a quad fellow is someone who can sort of function at the interface of STEM, like academia, policy, and industry. So that was something that I talked about a lot. And I still feel like that is one of the biggest takeaways from the Quad Fellowship, like exposure to industry, exposure to policy, exposure to people in positions of public service. And I think one thing that you may want to see for yourself is that like a bigger thing is that you get to meet these 100 fellows who are coming from different aspects of STEM and sort of collaborate with them. So that's something that's like really unique, and definitely use it to your advantage. Okay, we still have sort of like a little bit less than 10 minutes. So any more pressing questions? Raise your hands, folks. Okay, Sarah has another question. Tell us what your question is,
Yeah.
Sarah.
Yeah, I'll go quick. Did you see a similar number of people from different fields like environmental science or computer engineering, etc.? Like, I just wanted to see if there is some normalization happening
No, I
across
don't
these
think there is
fields.
any specific quota or like hidden numbers. At least I didn't notice anything. But last year, it was only quad countries. So it was only 4 countries, and there were 25 fellows
Right.
from each country to be selected. So I don't know how many fellows will be selected from each country this year, but I would say that I don't think I saw like some sort of rough numbers, because you can also go see the IIE website and they have posts about fellows from different fields and numbers on that. So make sure to check that.
Okay,
any
thank
other
you.
questions? Who wants to ask a question next?
I think Sabah has their hand up.
Sabah, tell us your question.
Hi. So my question is basically, so the Quad countries and the focus on kind of democracy Is that something that kind of comes up in how you guys think about the role of these 4 countries in kind of advancing STEM and STEM policy, and how you talk about your work?
Hmm.
Junryu, I
Yeah.
see you nodding. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think what makes this fellowship unique is that there is a much stronger emphasis on that compared to other fellowships that you might see across the board. So in that sense, I think you do need to have a certain level of antenna towards like, oh, like how is this impacting the region? And especially we sort of live in a very volatile time, both technologically and geopolitically. And so just being aware of those challenges, realistic challenges, is very important. I think it's one thing to know the technology side, and that's also impressive, but it's also stepping back a little bit and seeing how that would actually impact the society or the region. I think that would be very important outlook to have, and expressing that view certainly would show to whoever's interviewing or whoever's reviewing your application that you have your own sort of minds about certain things that are going on in the world right now.
Yeah. Okay, I think Priyanka can answer the next question, but I'm gonna move on to the next question. So does anyone else have a pressing question? Raise your hand. Okay, I don't see a hand. So I'm gonna pass it over to Priyanka. Do you have anything to add to this question that Sabha just asked?
I think I was just going to say that similar to what Junryu said, because Quad Fellowship, especially in our cohort, was to promote more cross-cultural collaboration across the Indo-Pacific region. So there was definitely like focus on the policy aspect of it. So yeah, I think we did have to talk about that as well. Sometime, I mean, it wasn't really an application question, but in the interview it did come up. At least for me, it did. So yeah, it'd be a good idea to focus on that. I mean, I think you need to focus on that after the application stage. For the application stage, you need to focus on yourself, the research that you're doing, how it can help the society in general. And then when it goes to the interview stages, both the technical and the panel, the technical, I don't think anybody's going to ask you about policy stuff, but it's always good to be prepared. But especially for the panel ones, it would be good to like just be aware of what's going on in the regions, and how your impact, if it can, how can it sorry, your research, if it can, how can it impact these regions basically.
Yeah, I think the name does say Quad Fellowship, and as you can see, there are students only from certain countries who are eligible. So there's definitely like a unifying theme of Indo-Pacific region. So I don't remember specifically being asked some numbers or statistics or like, oh, who's the president of this Indo-Pacific country. But I think at the end of the day, like I said, this is a fellowship that cares not just about your research, but what you do out of the lab, your leadership qualities, your ability to talk about policy, or like something like that, so many things. Like even the prompts that are asked in the application sort of explain that. So keep that in mind and definitely expect questions along those themes. Okay, Yashwant has another question.
Hey, hi, another quick question. So when you told about the policy at the second round, so what type of policy we are supposed to know? Is it like
No,
this?
okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but it's kind of like the science policy things, what's going on this Indo-Pacific region, or like it's a kind of like civil policies, like the diplomatic policies, like what exactly
No,
they.
it wasn't really like a policy interview. I think one of the fellows did use that word, but it wasn't really like they're quizzing on policy. It was just a general interview that was not particularly specific to your research. It was mostly asking about your other qualities, like your leadership qualities, your ability to think beyond your research, and your ability to relate your research to the external world, the social impact that your research will have, and things like that. So I wouldn't say it was like quizzing on policies, but it was definitely like social impact. That's the way to think about it. And I think you don't have to know, like I said, you don't have to know about exact policies, or you don't have to know what was this bill that was passed last week or something like that. But you do need to have a general idea about what's happening in the world. What are some of the pressing things? They may ask, like, I don't know, how do you think this is going to play out or something like that. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, certainly knowing like certain things that are very specific things that are going on in the world would be definitely helpful in making your case or how it could relate to what you're saying, what you're interested in, but don't make it so like you're remembering certain things just for the sake of it. I think I would avoid doing that. Only mention it when it's very much relevant to what you want to do and what you're trying to learn or what you're trying to research.
Sure. Thank you so much. And like one add-on question for this is like so on the first round you submit all the statement of purpose CV. Like how do you shortlist in first round based on our CVs or
No,
like
it's like a cohesive, like based on everything. So that's why you submit all your applications. So someone also asked, what is the most important thing about your application? I would say everything, right? And also the statements that you write are very important. So it's not just one specific thing. And also we don't know how they shortlist. It's like a black box. But I just know that they look at every aspect of your application. Yeah, Priyanka, you were going to say something.
No, I was literally going to say the same thing, that your application is a totally like it's a compound of all the things. So your diversity statement, your SOP, your CV, resume, they all matter like equally. So wouldn't focus on one thing, but like I think Junryu and a couple other fellows said earlier, do not make it redundant. If you put something in the resume, you don't really have to talk about the same thing or mention the same thing, at least not in a single line. Just for example, maybe you won a gold medal, like you're the gold medalist at your university. That can be an accolade on your resume, but adding that as a single line on your SOP does not make sense, right? So if you want to still bring it up, you can, but maybe talk about your qualities or why was that important. Maybe you were going through something super personal, but even then you maintained a good academic record or something like that, I think would make sense.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Do we have any more questions? Or I think it's a good time to hop off the call. I just want to say one more thing. Like someone just asked, why could we connect with you all? So we do all have public profiles, but I just want to say that we have very limited time, and we are all saying this and doing this thing from our personal capacity. Obviously, IIE will be doing their own formal info sessions later, so make sure to keep your eyes peeled for that, and please do attend those official info sessions as well. But I think this will be recorded, and we will try to share this. And there's also another fellow, Dhruv Agarwal, who did a blog post. So make sure to go through that. And I think this info session that we hosted personally also explains a lot of things. So please do try to refer to these. And yeah, I just want to say that. So it's hard for all of us to explain or give personal input to every single person who's approaching us individually. So I just want to say that. But yeah. Okay.
Hey, like one last question, please don't mind. Since you are a PhD student, so I'm also PhD student, so we get fellowship from the department. So like if they ask like, why do you so how can we pitch up this?
Hey, Yashwant, I think I answered this question in the chat many times, but I will say it for one last time, and then I think we're going to wrap up, unless the other two quad fellows want to say something. So there are a lot of fellows who already have funding from the university who also have the quad fellowship. There are some fellows who have NSF fellowship and many other different fellowships along with the quad fellowship. So it's not like if you have another fellowship, they're going to say you're disqualified. But at the same time, I will also email IIE to confirm how the quad fellowship funds can be used this year, whether it can be used to substitute your stipend, or is it like an add-on to your stipend, or is it personal funds. You have to email IIE to confirm this. I hope that explains your question. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending. We do plan to share this recording. I will probably post the link to the original post on LinkedIn and Twitter. So keep your eyes open for that. And also make sure you attend the official info sessions that IIE hosts. And yeah, have a nice day or have a nice rest of the evening. And I think we can end. And thank you, Priyanka and Junryu, for hanging out till the end as well. Okay.
No problem. Thank you.
Have a good day, guys. All the best.
It was really nice seeing you guys after so long. I feel like I haven't seen you in such a long time, and
Yeah.
it's really nice to chat. Yeah.
Honestly,
Thanks
Thank
so
you
much
for
for coming. I
organizing.
really appreciate it. Honestly,
No, no
I was
problem.
yeah. You guys are also taking time off your day to come and attend, right? So that's a good thing. Yeah. Thank you
Anything to
so
get out
much.
of doing homework, so yeah.
Yeah.
Valid.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Good luck
Hope
to
to catch up
everyone.
soon again, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.